Welcome. What is up? We are back. Welcome to the Mixer. I'm your host, RC. I'm joined by my lovely co-host here, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. We're already a month into the new year. Things have gone by quickly, but doing
Yeah,
great over here.
yeah, you sound great. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
thanks
we,
to
we stepped our equipment game up a little bit.
I got a Christmas present from you that included this nice little microphone here. So hopefully the sound comes across a lot better.
Yeah, it's very used. So yeah, we are the Mixer. We're back. It's been a little while. Uh, Life has happened. Been grinding out those freaking Coursera certificates, and I think I'm at a good point now to where at least I know that I'm not getting job interviews because they don't like me, and not that I'm not qualified. So that's great. A lot has changed in the world since we last year. Now we have access to artificial intelligence at our fingertips, so that's been fun. Jeff, what have you been up to, my dude?
Just looking for jobs. I did the Google data analytics course you sent me.
Mhm.
That was for me, I've done a lot of that stuff already. But the course is great. Like I have nothing bad to say about it. I think I finished it in like 2.5 weeks or something like that. Uh, Normally it's a course that if you have no experience, they say takes like 6 months, right? Like doing it like 10 hours a week or something like that. But again, it's a great course, teaches you a lot. Very basic on some of the like programming type stuff or whatever, but gives you a good idea of what data analytics is about, I guess. Uh, yeah, I mean, other than that, just looking for a job. Uh, but things are going well overall.
Sweet, we are on that grind. So obviously we got some sports to catch back up on. We got the Super Bowl this week. We got Eagles hosting. Well, I mean, it's neutral site, but uh, the Eagles favored against the Chiefs in Arizona. Um, and we got Formula One. We got car launches coming up, so that's been exciting to see the new cars. Well, at least the new liveries. But yeah, we should probably talk football first, Jeff. Well, what are your thoughts about the Super Bowl, my dude? Who's gonna take this thing, or and the NFL season in general? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of so the last two teams are two teams that I have Super Bowl bets on. My wife and I joined with my father-in-law and some of his friends, and we all pool our money together and make a few bets every year. And we all kind of pick a team, and someone picked the Chiefs, someone picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl. So it's a win-win for me. I remember telling my wife at the beginning of the year, I think it was actually after the Tyreek trade when that happened. And she was talking about the Chiefs, or, we were talking about football in general. And I told her I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs went like 14-3 and Mahomes won the Super Bowl and got MVP and all that. And I've been right about a lot of that so far. Um, he's probably going to win the MVP. Uh, I don't think they're favorites. I think the Eagles are a better team going into the Super Bowl, but I think it's fairly close. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we're down to the final two teams, and I really think you have the two best teams in the league playing each other. And I don't think there's many years you can really say that. Um, Usually it's two of the four or five best teams, but I do think this year it's the two best teams playing, and I do think the Eagles should be favored. They've just absolutely demolished seemingly everyone that's come across their path. Um, but like I said, I don't think this game really gets out of hand. I think maybe the Eagles win by 7, maybe it's 14 at the end of the game or something like that for one of the teams if there's a late touchdown type thing. But I think for the most part, this is going to be a good game, maybe similar to the Chiefs 49ers game that happened a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, that's really where I'm at with it.
We have the variable of all the Chiefs injuries, including Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he has a high ankle sprain, so and those don't get better. They take a while to heal.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's going to reduce his mobility, but in the conference championship game, I couldn't really tell too much. It didn't limit him, but yeah, Eagles should be favored. I 100% agree with you that these are the two best teams, and that's not always the case. Last year, I mean, there were probably two teams better than the Bengals on the AFC side, but we got that Burrow magic. So, yeah, I agree with you there. I don't know that it's going to be a close game. I could see the Eagles blowing the Chiefs out. I couldn't see the inverse happening, but with the injuries and how good Philly's defense is and how bad the Chiefs defense is, and I think a lot of what the Eagles do well can exploit it. Like they can run the ball, they can pass the ball, and I mean they have what's their freaking defensive end that I can't think of, Chris something I want to say on the Chiefs. I
Oh,
should know
you're
his
thinking about
name.
Chris Jones?
Yeah, Chris Jones. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a freaking game wrecker, but with a mobile quarterback and Jalen Hurts and the way that Philly's able to execute the option run, um, I think that's going to negate his impact a little bit on the game. So for the Chiefs to win, they're going to need 4 quarters of fourth quarter Mahomes, which is certainly in the in the cards. I doubt the Chiefs have been underdogs in any game really with under Mahomes. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of narrative going on. Mahomes can freaking do anything. He's the best quarterback in the league, but I think Philly's like one of the most well-rounded teams we've had in a while. So I think they're gonna get it. I could see them walking away with it, but you can't ever count Mahomes out. I mean, it's a very talking head take, but yeah,
Yeah,
he's done.
I fully agree with you on that. I do think though, for our 49er fan friends, they should look at this Eagles team and pray that Trey Lance is healthy and performs well next year, because you see the advantages. Like both of those teams are built very similarly, and you see the advantages that the running quarterback can bring you. Not that the 49ers were bad this year. Obviously, they made it to the conference championship game and all that, right? But you see, like the Eagles, I think they've beat 5 or 6 teams this year by 20 plus points. They won both their playoff games by 20 plus points or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Like, they're just the dimensions that Jalen brings, being a above average thrower of the football and an above average runner of the football. It just makes their offense so hard to stop.
Yeah, I mean, watching the NFC Championship game, they were whatever that option run is. They run between the tackles. Against the Cowboys, who have a good defense, maybe at times the best defense in the league this season, and they were able to just run that play and get 6, 7, 8 yards anytime they wanted. It's like how do you like? And I think Josh Norris from Underdog Fantasy, formerly of Rotor World, did a breakdown that if the Chiefs need to win, they need to stop this play.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't see how you do it. I mean, they execute it perfect. So that's something to look out for, the little X's and O's. If that inside handoff is letting them get chunk plays, then the Chiefs are going to need to turn the ball over or come up with some magic, because yeah, I mean, being able to get 6, 7, 8 yards on first or second down, like
Right.
that's a problem
Yeah.
for the opposing team. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned some bets. I think I got, like, when the playoffs started, I put a future on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, just because I was like, well, the odds are good. They're only going to shrink as they progress through the playoffs. So I put that down, and then I also put one down on Jalen Hurts MVP. So I got a little bit of. I think I actually win out more if the Chiefs win. But yeah, those are the bets I got. There's some interesting long shot plays for MVP, but I mean it's always going to be the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Miles Sanders, I think he's like 6-1 or something. If he gets a few touchdowns or breaks off, and the Eagles focus on the run and controlling the game, I could see him winning. Juju Smith-Schuster on the other side got a little bit longer odds. Maybe he's the only healthy wide receiver. Maybe they're doubling Kelsey, and he gets 2 or 3 TDs, and Mahomes has like a sub, below his average. So those are just some thoughts, but I mean, it's probably going to be the quarterbacks. Like 9 times out of 10, it's going to be one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you that I think if there's a chance, I'm not really on the Juju train, and just because I think if a receiver for either team has a big game, I think the quarterback's probably going to have a big game as well. And it's hard to give the receiver the MVP over the quarterback. But you never know. I do think that we could have when the Chiefs played the 49ers a few years ago and Darrell Williams went crazy. And I heard somebody mention this the other day that Mahomes probably doesn't win that. If Darrell Williams gets the third touchdown, he had 2, right? And there was a third one where Mahomes could have flipped to him and he didn't. And instead Mahomes ran it in, right? So he got the touchdown. If Williams there gets that third touchdown, maybe he wins the MVP that game, right? Because it's hard not to give it to a running back in that situation. And you brought up Miles Sanders. If he happens to go off, right? Like the Chiefs are selling out to stop Jalen and Sanders rushes for 150 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. I could see something like that happening, right? Or on the flip side for the Chiefs, I can't really see anyone outside of Pacheco doing it, but if he happens to break off a big run for a touchdown, maybe gets a catch or two, for 20, 30 yards and a touchdown, and then another short touchdown type thing. But I really think a running back is going to have 3+ touchdowns to win it from one of these quarterbacks. I think a defender might even be more likely than a non-quarterback offensive player. Because a defender probably just has to get a pick 6 and maybe one other big play type thing. And if it's a low scoring game, they have a chance there. So,
yeah, that's a good call out. So, but yeah, it's almost like they should have 3 different categories. They should have MVP, which will default to the quarterback probably, offensive player of the Super Bowl or something, and defensive player, and they can name it after friggin' I'm trying to think of a position player that is goated in Super Bowl lore.
Well, I also think too, and I don't know how much this would change it. It probably actually reinforces the quarterback even more. But if you did a full playoff MVP, right? And obviously it's going to go to whatever team wins the Super Bowl, but then you're more than just one game type thing. But
then that limits our debates. What are the talking heads going to argue about? So, yeah, I mean, they're creating solutions for problems we need in that case. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm not too hyped for the Super Bowl. Maybe because the Chargers flamed out in the most Chargerific fashion. And I mean, Burrow didn't make it, so That's and like I like the Eagles, but yeah, I mean I'm rooting for Devonta Smith. That's where we're at. That's who I'm rooting for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's football, biggest game of the year. It's still exciting.
One last thing about the Super Bowl for me is I would not be surprised if either Eagles receiver went for like 150 plus yards. The Chiefs are kind of notorious for giving up big games to big name receivers, and while AJ Brown is the like big name over there, right, and probably the best receiver on the team, Devontae is also very good, and so I wouldn't be surprised if either of them, goes for a big game. I mean, we saw T. Higgins and Jamar Chase against the Chiefs just 2 weeks ago. Kind of whenever they needed a play, almost, you know, just throw it up and they're gonna right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yeah, I was watching the freaking. I rewatched the Super Bowl from last year, and the main reason the Chiefs were in that game is because Higgins made that freaking face, or the Bengals were in the game is because Higgins made that freaking face mask pull bomb right after halftime, and then Jamar Chase got like a big bomb in the first quarter.
yeah,
Man, yeah, I'm excited. Looking forward to the game. I will say though that I probably am more excited for the start of the Formula One season. If you're ready to transition over
let's
topics
do
there,
it.
Jeff. So we've had a few car launches so far. Off the top of my head, we had Red Bull, which was hilarious. Alfa Romeo's launch, which was yesterday. And we've had Haas, and there's one more I'm missing.
Williams.
Who am I missing? Williams. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is very, very samey. So, yeah, the Williams looks good. The Haas, a little bit more black on it, which I think is going to be a trend. Looks good. No new aero parts. It was very much with like the freaking stock model,
Yeah.
all except for the Alfa Romeo, which looks great. Has all kinds of little winglets. Obviously, it's probably not the final version, but we get to see a little bit of it. It did look hyper developed. There's a lot of little wing elements in the front wing, especially where, yeah, I mean, it's looking like late stage F1 car regulation evolution, which is pretty wild to see. Year two of the new, but yeah, I mean, maybe they're lacking downforce. Maybe they just threw on the fanciest looking wing they had, and they're like, all right, this'll give the freaking neckbeards on Twitter something to talk about. And then we had the Red Bull launch, which was just chef's kiss troll. Did you watch any of it?
No, I could care less about watching the actual launches. I love seeing the cars though. Red Bull has trolled for what, like 15 years straight with basically the same design.
Yeah. So in the build up, I'm not sure if you saw any of it, but they kept posting on social media like, "Oh, it's a blank slate," and they kept showing like an all white Red Bull, and people were like, "Oh," because everybody freaking wants to cream themselves over the white Red Bull, which looked great. Performed terribly, but it did look great. And the capital J's are saying that they were kind of sold a false bill of goods that they were actually going to see the new car, which, I mean, it came out with the most basic aero package and pretty much the same exact livery. And
right.
in my head canon, that is just Christian Horner and Max Verstappen. Like, how about we just fuck with everybody and make it like this big gala in freaking New York about fashion, and then just have the same exact car.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, I'd be a little surprised if Max did that because Max just seems to not care about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But like Christian 100% is just playing a mental game with everyone, right?
Yeah. And then
also,
they had, and
yeah,
go ahead.
go.
I was just gonna say, and then they had Stefano Domenicali, who team principal. I'm not sure of his title role. Technical engineer or something was supposed to come up there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, he left to go do a hit on CNN or something."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Red Bull just doesn't care, right? Like they're there for the product on the track, right? Like they're there to sell energy drinks. They don't care what they look like, right? They got a pretty good looking design, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they trotted out their other Red Bull athletes to basically kill time. I'm not sure if what their profession is or what extreme sport they're in, whether it's like DJing or breakdancing. I mean, Red Bull sponsors everybody or
Right.
skateboarders. I mean, I hate to profile, but they seem very action sport, Zoomer sport athletes or performers. And yeah, they just talked in the most generic terms about Formula One, about how defending the title is going to be even harder or something like that. They had some other announcer earring was banging into the microphone or something. So it was kind of a shit show.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was great, and I love seeing people up in arms at the teams for it. Like the launches for them. It's for their brands. It's for them to self promote, and yeah, it's not for Formula One press. It's to make headlines.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they got the benefit of getting the big headline with the Ford announcement. So, but that had already been leaked. So yeah,
Right.
like there was all this build up, and that was going to be the big thing, and we already knew about it.
Yeah.
What do you think about Ford uh, coming on to Red Bull for the 2026 season?
I I don't know enough about it. Like I've read a little bit about it that one of the things I read makes me not all that excited for it, because I read that Ford is basically just going to put their brand on the motor or whatever, but they're not going to actually do a whole lot as far as like designing and everything.
Yeah,
That's a little disappointing if that's what it is. If Ford is actually getting involved, then that's much more exciting, right? Because then that technology might actually trickle its way down to your everyday like F-150 and stuff like that. But if they're not, really doing that, if it's more of just like a branding type deal, then we'll see. But I'm excited that Ford is interested, right? But we'll see what it actually ends up being.
yeah. It the details on all that haven't been fleshed out yet, or at least not that I've seen. So we do already have teams that are kind of having that same relationship that you mentioned, where it's like a branding thing. They just slap the Ford logo on an engine or a component that they didn't Ford the company didn't contribute to. Alfa Romeo right now is probably the primary example of that, where I mean, there's no engineers from Alfa Romeo. It's a Ferrari engine. It's Sauber doing the chassis, um, and yeah, they just put Alfa Romeo sticker on it. Aston Martin, in a sense, I don't think they contribute any IP to that team. Um, Gosh, I can't even like think of I mean, they're a little bit more because they don't have like Sauber running things like Alfa Romeo does. I guess it would be technically Aston Martin, but it's like its own operation, which was what formerly Racing Point, which was formerly Force India, which was formerly something else I can't remember. But yeah, and then there's one other example, Alpine. Alpine is Renault, which
Right.
I don't know. Renault's trying to make Alpine their kind of like performance branch. So that I mean, technically, that's kind of a more factory effort. Alpine does race in other forms of motorsport under the Alpine badge. So, but yeah, I do share some of your reservations. However, at least from the Ford perspective, they would like to say that they are going to be involved with some of the technological aspects. I've heard reporters speculate on whether or not that's actually going to be true, but they do have some working knowledge of like hybrid systems, the ERS, and maybe they're going to be involved with how that's incorporated into the powertrain for the 2026 car. So,
Right.
but Red Bull is making the engine. Red Bull, what is it? Red Bull Racing
Red Bull
Technologies, or I can't.
powertrains, I think.
There it is. Yeah. So, and that's going to be a new effort. And right now they're working with Honda on the current engine. So, yeah, I mean it's very incestuous, but I think Ford's going to try to be involved as much as they can, and it's whether or not Red Bull lets them.
Right.
I mean, if they are able to have a good working relationship, then maybe they can supply other engines. You got AlphaTauri, who is currently, a Red Bull B team. They are their own outfit, but
No,
I
they're
would
not.
assume, yeah, I mean, they're going to have, that same engine in it. I'm not sure if they're going to have a Ford badge on that car. So that'll be interesting. But, but yeah, I mean, it's good. We got an American manufacturer involved, at least on an
In a way.
increased stage.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I mean, we do have the other big news about Andretti kind of partnering with GM, and the current team's not kind of being in favor of adding an additional team. Jeff, what are your thoughts on Andretti, GM, and the bastards that want to keep the Americans out?
So I have a few thoughts on this that in my head are related, but may not be to everyone else. I think that it's so personally, I think the fact that AlphaTauri is a team and so closely tied to Red Bull is wrong for sport. It's like saying if, the Yankees and the Orioles were related, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the Yankees, like minor leaguers, got to go to the Orioles. And then when the Yankees felt like they were ready, you know, yes, we're competing against each other, but I'm just going to pull those guys up to the big team, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that that's one of the 10 allowed teams, I think they should be disbanded and just add a 10th team, right? That's where Andretti can come in. That's my personal view on it. I know they're not like run the same, right? That's obvious by the fact that AlphaTauri never performs as well as Red Bull. But that's also a mark against the AlphaTauri Red Bull relationship. You would think that at some point, if they were both truly run independently, AlphaTauri would make some sort of jump, right? Like they would get better. They would be more than just a midfield team at some point, most likely, that type of thing. But that's just my view on it. As far as the Andretti specifically, I think that Andretti would get in a heartbeat if GM were making the engine. The fact that they want to use a Renault engine and maybe GM partners with them to work on it or whatever, or something along those lines. I kind of understand why some of the Formula One teams don't want to let them in, right? They're not. It's not like Andretti is, um, just dominating every form of motorsport they get into, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're good. Don't get me wrong, but it's also they have a limited amount of money. While that money might be large to us, they're not Mercedes, right? Which is a $80+ billion revenue a year company that can throw a little bit of money at Formula One and be fine, right? They're not Ferrari. They're not, some of these other teams. So to expect them to come in, I don't think they want another Haas, right? Where the team comes in and the owner is just in it to make money, basically, right? Um, and so I fully understand that. As a fan, it's frustrating. I would love to see two more cars on the grid. I would love to, maybe they're not going to challenge the top few teams, but maybe they can challenge for like fifth or sixth, right? Like that type of fight. That would be more fun. That's really where I'm at with it. Is from a viewing perspective, I would love it. Um, I fully understand it from a team perspective, being skeptical. You don't want to just add a team that's going to suck, right? Like
Mm.
that's not fun for anyone. And like I said, I think if Andretti were taking more ownership of the, um, full making of the car, I think that it would be more likely to get approved. But the fact that they're not,
Hmm.
I don't see how they get approved, to be honest.
There, yeah, there are a lot of moving elements for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned the role AlphaTauri and the partnership between them and Red Bull plays into this. Yeah, I believe in the biz that it's what they call economies of scale. As your operation grows larger, you can expand and spread out expenses. With the hard cap, now I find it hard to believe that these teams aren't partnering in some way. I don't know what the rules are as far as like data sharing goes, but I mean, what's to stop friggin' whoever the whoever runs the wind tunnel at AlphaTauri from scribbling something on a napkin and dropping it in in the Red
Right.
Bull factory or something.
Well,
I think it's impossible that that's not going on, and I feel like if the teams aren't doing that, then they're not, they're not really trying.
I mean, not to even bring up Red Bull and AlphaTauri, but we saw last year with the Haas Ferrari partnership how similar those cars looked, right?
Hmm.
Like, you're telling me that Haas, with their limited budget, right? Granted, they did get some Ferrari engineers, right? Because Ferrari had
Hmm.
to cut, and all that. But you're telling me that those two teams, with their vastly different resources, all that, came up with cars that look that similar, and
Yeah,
nobody else did at the start of the
yeah,
season?
yeah, yeah, 100% agree with you. And I mean, we're kind of seeing that play out with Williams this year too, because they hired on as their team principal, like one of the head engineers or something for Mercedes. So
Right,
it's not a it's not a like for like role change. It's like a promotion, and now Mercedes kind of has this in with Williams.
right.
So we're gonna have to see how those cars perform in with each other. And yeah, I mean Ferrari with Haas, Ferrari with Alfa Romeo. I could see Ferrari not doing it to the same scale because they don't seem to be able to understand like what's right in front of them. But I mean, I've said it before, but I do think like that's why we're kind of seeing um, a lot of these teams interested in hypercar programs too, because although it's not a like for like, it's still a way you can spread out the budget and engineers and keep people on the payroll that you can cull from. Like
Right.
maybe the freaking WEC engineer for Ferrari is, you know, lights out or something, or even like the fucking pit crew or something.
Right.
You got these guys on the payroll, like, hey, want to come work for the Formula One team?
Yeah, I mean,
So
if you're Ferrari, right, and last year after the summer break, you've basically lost the championship already, right? So maybe you throw an engineer or two at a hypercar and say, "Hey, go see if you can figure out something that you can maybe bring back to our Formula One team next year," right? Like, that stuff, I don't mind that as much. I hate the intermixing of the teams, right? Like that's what bugs me more than anything is when like, Red Bull and AlphaTauri. Haas and Ferrari, and now potentially Mercedes and Williams, right? And it's like you're supposed to be competing against each other. I understand guys move teams and stuff like that, right? That makes a lot of sense. And if the Williams looks a lot like the Mercedes, that makes sense to me too. You're losing a head engineer on a team that was better. He's going to change the direction that Williams was going, right? Just like some of the Haas guys did last year, coming from Ferrari. But when it seems very blatant, and when there's never any competition between the two teams that are connected, that's when it gets really suspect to me. That's why, like, AlphaTauri, as far as I know, for the last like 15 years, hasn't even competed with Red Bull. Like they're not even close. And it's just, and then the fact that, like, they've had Vettel, they've had Verstappen, but they just immediately, once they show like, oh, we're good, go up to the big league club, right? Like that's, you're clearly sharing resources, and that's the problem I have there.
Before Red Bull had their engine supplier locked up, they did have, back when AlphaTauri was called Toro Rosso, they had Toro Rosso running Ferrari engines, and then Red Bull was running Renault engines at the time before they leaked up with Honda. So, but yeah, ever since they've had the same engine, that's been a closer relationship. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to figure out what the right thing is. These teams being linked, like, it probably props up the senior team more, but it does help the junior team, and they're able to kind of farm talent like drivers and stuff that way. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's up to people like me and you to make sure the audience is aware and like keep a lookout. But yeah, them pushing out Andretti or not letting them in is not, it's not in the spirit of the sport. If there's a team that wants to compete, they should come and be able to. They're the current teams on the grid don't want to share the profits, essentially, because it's kind of like, is it MLB that has profit sharing, or maybe the NFL too, where all the revenue that the sport generates gets kind of divvied up between the teams, and if they add another team to that, then yeah. But I mean, I feel like that can kind of get negotiated out, or they should come up with some sort of system to where, I don't know, maybe they get like a limited, or they get like a break even or something for the first couple of years.
Well, that's what the entry fee is supposed to do. It's supposed to make up for that loss for the first few years. That's why the entry fee is like $200 million, right?
Yeah.
Like, the issue I have is it feels like the goalposts are constantly being moved on Andretti, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like first it was, can they cover the entry fee? Then Andretti comes out and is like, yeah, we can comfortably cover the entry fee, right? Then recently I heard something like Andretti needs like $700 million or something like that. And then they need a manufacturer, and then and it's like, just, if they want to pay you $200 million and they never even come up with a product, who cares? Right? Like, you still have your 10 other teams. If they happen to not, they don't show up, right? Like, I don't know. That's just the part that I don't get. I get it that Formula One wants to, maintain the quality of the product, but you already have the 107% rule or whatever. If Andretti makes a car that can't, keep up and can't match the times to whatever's already in place, then they just don't get to race, like
107% rule. Yeah. I remember when that actually kept cars out of the race. So, but yeah, I mean, you know what I think it is when it comes down to? This might be a little controversial. I can't. It's been a while. Xenophobia. They are afraid of the Americans, and I hear it in every broadcaster's voice. They're like disdain for all the U.S. F1 races, for U.S. fans, and how they they say, oh, they're like social media F1 fans, and yeah, they just get talked down the way they freaking masturbate to Silverstone, and through goes Hamilton. Everybody talks about Crawford. Through goes Hamilton. I rewatched that. He like lost the positions back like within a lap and a half or something. So I mean, it
No,
was like it was an epic double pass, but it didn't
hold
even
on.
stick.
Well, he lost them back like literally the next turn because
Yeah,
Perez pushed him off the track. Perez should have gotten like multiple penalties throughout like 3 turns there and didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, if I think people find it epic because it's the first time Mercedes had really like competed all year, right? And it's at Silverstone. But
Uh-huh.
I'm with you. I do think that F1, I think European and, well, I think international fans and international sports are afraid of Americans joining. And I don't mean
Mm-hmm.
this in a truly xenophobic way, right? Like I know you're saying that jokingly. I
Mm-hmm.
think that they look at American sports, and when you contrast American sports versus European sports or international sports in general, is they're very different, right? And we can use the main leagues as comparisons, right? If you look at the
Mm-hmm.
NFL or baseball or basketball or hockey even versus the Premier League or versus Formula 1, what matters in these sports, right? Like in international sports, the regular season matters. That's how you determine the best team is you have a set number of games and the team with the most points wins, right? Or the most
Mm-hmm.
wins, right? However you want to do it. Baseball could do this very easily. So could basketball. But Americans don't want that. Americans love the chance to have like luck involved for some
Mm-hmm.
reason because we want to believe that anyone can win anything on any given day. It,
Democracy.
yeah, right. But like I think internationally, they don't like the way our sports are run. They also look at some of our sports and they look at like, it's really kind of funny because baseball probably correlates most closely to, Premier League and Formula One, where like the teams that spend the money tend to win, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
teams that don't spend the money don't. But I think when it comes to Formula One, is I think that I kind of understand where they're coming from is that does Andretti really add more American eyes, right? And if it doesn't, then you're really just splitting the same amount of money from 10 teams to 11. So everyone's going to lose a little bit. I get that.
Yeah.
Um, but on the same side, it's like, you've got all these wanting Americans, right? Americans love racing, and you've got a sport that can come in, and if you made any kind of deal with an American team, like a true American team, I don't count Haas. Haas is there to make money for Haas, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
but if you got a true American team, let's say Andretti came in and became the fourth big team, right? Like they were in the battle for number. You've got potentially like 300 million people here who could be fans, and the problem is that the Americans are just going to be all American, and I don't think that's what they want. There's so many more Americans than there are anyone else in the world that's going to pay attention, right? Like
And
because
spend
red
money.
and spend money, yeah. And I don't think they want it to turn into an American sport. I think they want to keep it the way it is, and they're already fighting against some of that in terms of like Drive to Survive and stuff like Americans manufacture drama is what it is, and that's not what Formula One teams want.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, most of the Formula One analysis I consume is by Europeans, like the Brits specifically, and I mean that's the home turf for Formula One. Like, there's so many teams based in um in Great Britain or England.
Right.
I don't even know the difference. What, you got like four different names for your country. It's very confusing, but but yeah, I mean, I just hear that the vitriol, and they always bring up Drive to Survive and and how they kind of manufactured the bitterness between Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris for some reason that it rubs them the wrong way. But yeah, I mean, I get the bias. I just think that I don't know. There needs to be some awareness here that like whether whether the established teams and the established fan base like it or not, people are being able to consume a more diverse sports experience or media with streaming services and these reality shows. And yeah, I mean that's just like the globalization of sports consumption. It's going to happen, and it's a good sport. You should welcome it. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I freaking remember being the only guy who watched Formula One. I remember I worked with one other dude, and he watched it kind of casually, and I was like, "What? Holy shit! You're like a unicorn." And then I like ran into one other guy that watched it. So I met two people that watched Formula One before Drive to Survive, and now like I don't know, have open conversations. Like I was wearing my Mercedes shirt yesterday, and somebody was like, "Oh, you excited for F1? There must be a launch." I'm like, "Yeah, there is." And if you ask, in circling back to Andretti and the role they're playing in this, you ask an average American who's Max Verstappen, they're not going to know. Christian Horner, they're not going to know. Charles Leclerc, they're not going to know. Maybe if you ask them Schumacher, they'll know. Lewis Hamilton, maybe, but more Americans know the name Andretti, and he has, that the family kind of has this reverence in the U.S. because Mario raced for Ford and beat Ferrari at Le Mans and went on to win like X number of Indy 500s when the Indy 500 was a huge deal. Andretti still runs teams. There was Michael Andretti in the 90s. He's had other sons come up and do well in IndyCar. So, yeah, if you put the brand Andretti on a Formula One car, it's there's going to be exponential growth in U.S. eyes on the sport, which is already growing, and they're going to make more money, and it's going to squeeze out fans who have been there for a while, and they're not going to be able to afford to go to races as much, which is already a problem. And yeah, I don't know how you square that, but you can't argue that it wouldn't be good for the sport and good for the owners in the long term, and it's going to produce better stuff on track, which I think is great for the fans. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they rotate the tracks or come up with some general admission lottery or something. But yeah, it's changing, and I think the establishment just needs to accept it, welcome it, and hopefully we'll have a better product because of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for Andretti. I mean, I just can't see General Motors in Formula One. But Andretti has the partnership with Chevy because I think they supply the engine for their IndyCar team. Which might be playing a factor into it because I see Honda, they're registered to make a 2026 engine, and they already have the experience with being a current engine supplier. However, Honda is the other team that provides IndyCar engines. So maybe that's why Chevy stepped up and said, hey, we don't want to lose Andretti running our engines in IndyCar. So, yeah. More to come. I love this stuff. So they just announced, I think today, that the president of the FIA is kind of taking a step back from the daily operations, and he said some positive things about Andretti, so that's not a great thing, but yeah, we still got a lot to we still got a lot to find out about this, and I hope somehow cooler heads prevail, and Andretti is at least given a path forward to where they can, if they meet these objectives, they can get in rather than we'll think about it. Don't
Yeah,
call us, we'll call you.
I think, for me, if you're open to expansion teams, which Formula One definitely is, right? I think they can have up to 24 cars on the grid or something like that.
I think that's the
Um,
optimal
y-
24.
yeah, I think that you should have set rules on, what an expansion team would have to do. And as long as they can meet that criteria, then they get in, right? And that criteria can change every year. As profits go up, as things go up, you can say like, it scales by 2% a year or something like that, or 10% a year, right? So like, if this year it's a $200 entry fee, and you have to show us you have essentially $1 billion behind you, so that you can pay for the team for a couple years, right, and do some development. As long as you can show that, you get in, right? That's the issue I have with this whole thing, is it feels like they've got some of those in place, and then the teams just keep saying, no, you got to do more. No, you got to do more, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's really it.
they got to make it work. I mean,
Yeah,
Formula One's owned by the U.S. Liberty Media.
right. I'm
So
sure Liberty wants to get a real American team in there and, do all that. So,
yeah, the Euros are really going to be pissed when they add a race in New York. And where's another race that they could do?
oh, you got to get
Um,
like a true West Coast race. So you got to go, you
yeah,
can't really do
Long Beach.
LA. Yeah,
Long
Long
Beach.
Beach would be fun.
Long Beach is going to replace Monaco.
No,
People
no, 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 no. You
people
can't
will
get rid
lose
of
their
Monaco.
shit. Yeah, I know they can't, but it's probably coming. I don't know what they're going to do, but yeah, um,
Yeah.
I've been hugely against getting rid of Monaco, but I could just see it happening. Or at least like change the format, like make it a freaking time trial event or something.
Yeah.
But
Monaco with the cars being so big is just so, we saw it last year with Alonso just slowing down like 10 different cars, right?
yeah,
And no one could get past him. The cars are so big,
make
it's so hard to pass.
make every car run 50 laps,
Yep.
and the best overall time wins. I don't know. Yeah, they gotta mix it up. Well, whew, we got into it. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap her up? I know you mentioned LeBron James.
Yeah, so I got to talk about LeBron a little bit. So, you know, he's really the first athlete that, obviously growing up, I was born in 88. I was 10, I think, when Jordan hit the shot over Russell and had his second retirement, right? I watched basketball a little bit, got much more into basketball as I got older. And LeBron was really the first athlete that, um, I truly remember seeing and being like, oh, this guy's like special, special, right? Like I grew up with Griffey, I grew up with A Rod, watched Bonds, do all that stuff. But like, I remember seeing LeBron as a 16-year-old playing against Carmelo in high school. And then, he's obviously on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He's the chosen one, all that stuff. Comes into the league and immediately averages, 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists as a rookie. Takes his team to the finals, and I think it was year 3, something like that. Maybe it was year 4. Granted they lost to the Spurs, but I remember his game against Detroit where he scores the final like 25 points of the game and wins the game, and that was when Detroit had gone to like 3 or 4 straight like finals, it seemed like, or whatever. Then when he leaves Cleveland, goes to Miami, wins, goes to 4 straight finals, wins 2 of them. Then he goes to Cleveland again and goes to, however many more finals, and all that. I think eventually it was like 9 and 10 years or something like that. and wins a title with Cleveland, 2 with Miami, and then 1 with the Lakers. The man has had a seemingly endless prime. Granted, different versions of himself. His most athletic version was probably 2009, where he was, easily the best offensive player in the league as far as all around offense, and probably the best defensive player in the league. Then you have Miami. 2013 might be his best season overall. Then you have the finals in 2016 when him and Kyrie team up and they win, and they beat the best regular season team of all time. And then finally the bubble title with Anthony Davis and all that. It's just been really fun to watch, and he's in year 20 and really looks like he could probably play another 15 years if he wanted to be honest. It's really crazy to me seeing so many athletes throughout my lifetime. You see them and you go, okay, this guy's, 23, 24, 25. Now they're like 31, 32. They're going to start slowing down, right? And he just doesn't seem to do that. Obviously he's not playing every night anymore. He plays most. He's not as athletic as he used to be, stuff like that. But on any given night, he's arguably the best player in the world, which is pretty insane for someone that's 38 and in year 20. And last night, he breaks Kareem's career scoring record, which for a lot of people was almost untouchable in the NBA. Now, there's a few people that were close. Karl Malone got fairly close. Jordan, had he not retired a couple times, may have been able to get there. But that's also saying something to the longevity of LeBron, right? He's never had a big career, injury, never had to take a year off or anything like that. It's just pretty amazing. And he's also been the, best role model I can think of as far as an athlete who's been around this long. He's never been in trouble, never really been caught doing anything wrong, never been caught cheating on his wife, never been caught, hitting his kids or anything like that. Yeah, sure, he may say some controversial things to some people sometimes, and he might stand up for some things that people don't necessarily agree with. But overall, he's been, probably the greatest athlete of my lifetime. And I'm not saying he's the most dominant or, to me, he's my basketball GOAT, but I get people have, Jordan, some people still say Russell, all that. But as far as, being able to watch someone's full career, it's been really awesome. Last night was kind of essentially a lifetime achievement award, right? And, now it'll be interesting to see how far out he puts the record. I said last night in our group chat, I think he could get to 45. That would be playing probably 4 or 5 more years. Cause inevitably he's going to slow down, right? It's going to happen. It's just really how long does he want to play at this point? But we're also looking at something that may never happen again. I know people said that about Kareem, and people say that about any of these long-term, records, but without the NBA changing, and especially with load management happening and how guys play, really your stars are playing probably 75 games a year, 70 to 75 out of 82. It's going to be tough for anyone to get to wherever LeBron leaves it. I mean, Luka is probably the best shot at this point, and if you go by age, Luka's already 1,500 points behind LeBron or something like that. It's pretty crazy. So I would bet that the person that breaks this record, if anyone ever does, may not even be born yet. And if we look at Kareem's, I think LeBron was born about 9 months after Kareem set the record. Not saying the person who breaks LeBron's is going to be born in 9 months or anything like that, but it's going to take the NBA changing a little bit, I think, for someone to get to this record. And yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's really awesome. It's been fun watching his career. All the debates are fun, between him and Jordan and him and whoever you want to compare him to. But I truly hope that people appreciate him and the type of athlete he's been and the type of role model he's been, because these guys don't come around very often. I mean, even Jordan, who people like to point to as, in the basketball world, like their favorite, right? Or their GOAT. Um, he really shied away from a lot of controversial stuff. And LeBron tends to not. He tends to speak his mind a little bit more, which is nice to see. So, that's really all I got. It's, a really cool thing that he's done. And yeah.
Well said. Our generation has had some fortune when it comes to GOATs. So, I mean, Brady in the NFL, Jordan in the NBA, Messi in soccer, who put freaking Ronaldo in his grave, shipped him off out of another country. There's no, he just ended the GOAT debate. It's like the freaking North Carolina versus Duke debate when North Carolina beat Duke in the tournament, right?
Yeah.
So, or no, it was Coach K's last game because they would have met up in the finals, but they didn't meet up in the finals. But it was like, yeah, Coach K's last game, and North Carolina beat him. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I've gone through different stages of LeBron fandom. I mean, he's from Ohio, so he's got that going for him. Yeah, I mean, when he left the Cavs, I was a little bothered. Then he went back and won with them. I mean, that was huge. And then now he's on the Lakers, and I kind of have a love hate relationship with the Lakers. So, but I mean, there's no denying that he's at the very least not only in the a favorite, or there's going to be a higher percentage of people saying he's the greatest basketball player of all time, but he is one of the greatest athletes and physical specimens of all time. I mean, there's a debate that what if LeBron played soccer? What if he played tight end? And it's like, yeah, I could see him doing fucking anything because he's a monster.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those. He's like, if he were dropped into friggin' like uh, Europe in the Middle Ages, there would be tales of this freaking giant and how he was able to carry freaking tree limbs on his shoulders or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's something else. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's going to be tougher for athletes to do it, especially with training. And I mean, I would like to get into it more in the future, but the role that kind of technology is playing into sports, and especially with AI, we got to do another freaking simulation episode. I think we're due for round 2 in tech, and maybe we can get that out before F1 season starts, and a potential rebrand.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love the AI and the simulation talk.
All right, dude. Well, that's a good little teaser. You ready to wrap it up there?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening. Do not forget to, subscribe, like, all that stuff. If you're hearing us now, that means you probably are still subscribed. If you're new and somehow we popped up on your feed, maybe you're bored. There's less sports to download right now since it's before Formula One. Maybe your favorite Formula One podcast has new pair hosts that are not to your liking. Not calling out any F1 podcasts in particular. That would be unprofessional. But yeah, I mean, we are, I don't know, more casual, dumb American fans that can explain in layman's terms while still being kind of looped in. A fresh perspective that doesn't take itself too seriously. I got to work on our elevator pitch, man. I'm gonna ask Chat GPT to come up with the elevator pitch for us.
Yo, so my old boss asked me to write a recommendation for him on LinkedIn, and I just Chat
I use that
GPT'd
shit
it.
for everything. I use that shit for everything.
Oh my god, it was so great. It was like the best thing ever. And I just like copied it and pasted it and then put his name in there. And oh
Yeah.
my God, it was so great.
It's so generic, but yeah, I mean, it definitely takes out like 80% of the just like participation of doing something like that. And then you can just like put some flair,
Yeah,
boom,
exactly.
beautiful. Anyway, we'll get into all that. And yeah, thank you for listening. Until next time, to the loo.